I'm Adi, part of the LocalDevEx team here at Wix, and I'm here to talk with you about some of the challenges we're facing on our backend developers' local environments following the migration to Bazel. We'll briefly go over some of the challenges we're facing and talk about our current efforts to mitigate them in order to improve the current development experience with our Bazel ecosystem. The first challenge I would like us to cover is the diversity of the developers' environment we're facing with. So unlike CI, where build workers' environment executing builds are pretty much homogeneous, local developer environments differ from each other in many aspects. First, the different physical locations. Wix developers operate from different physical locations, mainly from Israel, Lithuania, and Ukraine. Each such location possesses different infrastructure capabilities that should be taken into account, as we rely on network and working with external cloud services, which impact the actual build process. Also, Bazel is affected from the operating system it is being executed on. This works well on homogeneous environment as we have in our CI, but Wix developers' environment are currently not managed that way, and developers are working both on macOS and Linux with different OS versions. Developers are likely to update their OS version on their own and on different timing, which make us vulnerable in that sense, both in our ability to share build outputs effectively across platforms, as well as from our supportability point of view. So Bazel ecosystem is relying on several external tools and components in order to operate properly. For example, Docker and Python are required, as well as Xcode for Mac. And we need to be able to verify those are actually available with supported versions and operate properly with Bazel version we are using, and also keep on updating. Another issue is the Bazel configuration. Bazel is a highly configurable tool. It accepts many configuration options and acts much differently according to them. And it also allows different extension levels for managing those configurations. In order to utilize Bazel properly across different local environments, we're required to have some level of alignment in that sense, as well as save the need for developers to handle those on their own. Doing so, we still need to enable developers to have some level of extension for the more advanced use cases. Another issue is the user accounts. In order for a local developer environment to work properly with Wix Bazel ecosystems, developers are required to have several external services configured with their own user account. For example, GitHub for accessing the source code, and Google Cloud we use for remote caching. So how we mitigate diverse environments? So first, we introduce the remote caching. A Bazel remote caching is implemented on top of Google Cloud Storage in order to optimize sharing of build outputs across our developer environments, allowing build output from one environment to be consumed on a different dev environment as much as we can. Another big effort we did is the Wixstaller, which is a CLI tool which is designed to configure and prepare any developer environment for working with Bazel ecosystem at Wix. This tool inspects the system for installed components and configurations, determine whether or not changes are required, and attempt to make necessary changes on its own in order to make the system ready to go. In cases where automatic resolutions are not possible, too risky or too intrusive, the tool guides the developer through a manual or a semi-manual actions to complete on its own. And we also supply a feature based on the IntelliJ Bazel plugin, which is called Diagnostics. First of all, I want to mention that IntelliJ is probably the most used IDE in Wix by the backend developers, to which we also supply this plugin. Part of the features we supply is the Diagnostics, a feature which scans the developer's local environment and guides the developer on how to resolve environment-related issues. It covers many things. Among them is some of the required plugins we expect, such as Scala and the native Bazel plugin, which checks for the appropriate versions. It also covers the plugin required settings and warns on mismatches. It covers the network access checks to various external services we depend on, such as the VPN, the GitHub, or the Google Cloud. It also scans the Bazel project view file for misconfiguration and warns for possible error-prone configurations. And the far most important thing maybe is it helps us producing a detailed summary of the environment state for better supportability by the LocalDevEx team in case of issues that need more troubleshooting. So this was the diverse environment challenge. And the second challenge I would like us to talk about is related to developer workflows. So day-to-day development flows happening on local environments are much more complex than what is actually happening on CI. It involves the human factor, which introduced the need to both simplify the ecosystem and provide different capabilities and tools which are still missing from the Bazel ecosystem. So first of all, Or mentioned our virtual monorepo. So I want to talk about it a bit more. In order to fully use the Bazel capabilities to build only what needs to be built, as well as trying to enforce a single version for third-party libraries across Wix codebase, and we in Wix utilized the virtual monorepo solution, which intended to give a viable solution to a single monorepo across all of Wix backend codebase. This allows Wix targets to be source dependent with each other. So Wix virtual monorepo is composed out of more than 50 actual Git repositories. Each of those repositories defines its own Bazel workspace. So while this concept works pretty good for CI flows, it has its drawbacks when it comes to day-to-day development flows. It is not intuitive to developers and therefore hard to work around in their day-to-day. Bazel IDE integration. So Bazel is quite new and groundbreaking build tool that introduces many new concepts. It is still lacking in context of community and IDE integration. As we mentioned earlier, at Wix we mainly use IntelliJ as our IDE for writing Scala code, to which migrating to use Bazel introduced many drawbacks, mainly comparing to the IDE integration level Wix developers were used to while working with Maven. And there's also the need to maintain Bazel build files. So as we aspire to use Bazel with granular targets in our code base in order to enable Bazel to optimize build flows as much as possible, developers were introduced with the need to maintain many build files manually on their own, which is something that is not straightforward to say the least. And in general, a hassle we all wish to avoid as it's prone to errors. So how mitigate that challenge? So as we acknowledge Wix virtual monorepo is not intuitive and doesn't really feel like working in a single repository, at least from the developer point of view, we supplied several tools and features to help and minimize that gap. One of those is LabelDex, which is a global index service for virtual monorepo source code, as well as for the managed third-party libraries we use. It indexes all classes and packages for the above and exposes several APIs as well as a UI interface that allows developers to query for any given symbol or a package for tracking its relevant Bazel target. Recently, we've also added a target view dashboard that allows the developers to get insights to the relevant dependency for a given target, as well as see the full dependency graph across the virtual monorepo. Another feature worth mentioning is pull rebase from our VMware origin master. It is the go-to action when developers need to rebase their workspace. So when working in Wix virtual monorepo, basically simulating pull from the VMware origin master branch. This action incorporates both pulling changes from the local repository master branch, as well as updating the dependent VMware repositories version to the latest master commit, in order to get the latest changes from those. Wix third-party dependencies are based on artifact consumed from Artifactory. As we are source dependent across VMware repository, we strive to manage a single version for third parties across all of the shared code base, in order to limit potential conflicts, both for build and runtime. Common third-party dependencies are managed in a core repository, usually by the core infra team, but we also explore the functionality of adding a third-party dependency override in a specific repository by using its third-party Maven coordinates. Another topic worth mentioning is the Bazel ID integration. We introduced Wixperiment, which is the Bazel intelligent plugin extension by Wix. As mentioned earlier, this is a Wix complementary plugin, which serves as an extension to the native Bazel IntelliJ plugin. It allows developers to hop on the Bazel train with more ease, improving development velocity with Wix-specific features, or such we wish existed on the upstream Bazel IntelliJ plugin. So it provides integration with Wix internal tooling, such as LabelDex, which we've mentioned earlier. It also provides Bazel generators for Wix-specific components. And it integrates a lot of velocity features for better fluency while working in the IDE, which are missing currently from the native Bazel plugin. In context of maintaining Bazel build files, so in order to mitigate the need to have developers maintaining build files manually on their own, we've introduced several tools to ease that pain. DevFixer is one of them. It's a dependency fixer tool. It does so by adding missing dependency the compiler requires to the relevant build file without any manual intervention. AutoDep is another feature designed for that, helping the developer while coding in the IDE. Adding a source dependency to your code, AutoDep will seamlessly resolve the required Bazel target and add the missing dependency on the fly to the relevant Bazel build file, without any user intervention, saving the need from the developers to do that manually. So the last challenge I would like us to cover is the lack of visibility we are facing. So for us, local developer environments are a major part of our production. As a development team, we would like to make decisions which are based on real data from our production environment. Such information collected from developers' environment can help us monitor and measure the quality of the service we provide, as well as help developers measure their own environment and work habits in context of local development experience, comparing to others in the organization. Unlike data collected from other production environments, collecting data from developer environment faces many challenges. So developer environment contains private and sensitive information about the developer and his work habits, which should be avoided in order to protect the developer privacy. Developers are likely to be uncomfortable with sharing this data if this is not guaranteed. Unlike CI build workers, developer environments are mostly not utilized to running builds and are usually used for doing other things as well. The process of collecting data from a developer environment should take that into account and be not intrusive in that sense. And as we mentioned before, the developer environment differ from each other and not managed by us. Collecting data from it is hard and prone to unexpected errors originated from the developer environment state. So how we try to face that challenge? So introducing LocalDevEx BI reporting. BI reporting for Bazel is an opt-in feature that allows developers to contribute anonymous Bazel build profile data from their local environment. It allows us to collect such data and build a BI data store from which we're able to get insights regarding how developers actually experience Bazel on their own environment and better operate accordingly. Once turned on, every Bazel build or test command executed on the developer environment will produce a Bazel build profile and spawn a separate async process which will send anonymous trace events constructed from that profile to the Wix BI platform. Based on this data, we supply several Grafana dashboards for different views, an exploration dashboard for aggregated data views and high-level exploration across our different developer environments, a general dashboard for general build metrics across our managed environments and tracking the BI reporting process itself, an insight dashboard for trying to get more depth insights, for example, what are the targets which has the most impact on the build critical path, and even a My Bazel experience dashboard, which can be used by the developer themselves to get their own data from their own local environment. Okay, so those are the main challenges we're currently facing and the efforts we do to mitigate them in our vision to improve the backend development experience at Wix. Thanks for your time.